Hey there, this is TC Mabe from the band Tuesday's Letter. Just going to do a quick run through of the gear that I use here in the home studio. For some people this is going to be really boring, and for other people it might be something cool. I know when I was trying to put together my home gear, I did a lot of research on a lot of videos, and there was some stuff out there that really helped me, so I wanted to try and pass the favor on. Basically what I've narrowed my whole control rig down to is a couple of devices in a rack mount. For portable recording, and then here at the house I use a couple of other things just to get into a PC, but I'll walk you through the gear from the bottom up and I'll try and be quick about it. The bottom here is a Furman power supply unit. It's the M-8X. It's a very inexpensive power supply. It has it basically serves the same function as like a power strip that you would plug into your wall. It's got a switched outlet on the front of it, which is kind of tough to see with this camera, and that's basically the power supply for everything that's in the rack above this. The next channel strip up here, or the next rack mount up rather, is the SM Pro Audio. Nice thing about this little unit is this is actually 8 different preamps that are being used to go into my recording software through the Fast Track Ultra 8R above it. But this really gives me a lot of control of the first stage of the signal. I have a lot of gain here, and it also has a 48 volt phantom power switch for each of the channels independent, which I kind of like because sometimes you have a mix of things that require phantom power and things that just don't, and sometimes you're limited where your other devices will be like a 1 to 4 or 5 to 8 like you'll see on the Fast Track above here. But basically that is from SM Pro Audio, and it's the PR8E, which is going to be hard to see because of that little light, but there it is, the PR8E. The other thing I really like about this unit too is it uses these combo jacks, or whatever they're called. The center of that is basically for plugging in something like a guitar cable, and the outer shell of it is for plugging in something like a microphone cable, which you can see I have plugged in here. So if you have something that has this type of jack on it here, it's pretty handy. Like I said, the center of this is really for plugging in a regular line like you would have on a guitar, and then the outer ring supports your microphone cable. So nice thing about this is I can use just about anything, and it only takes up that little one rack space. Now, out of the back of those, the PR8E, I actually have each of those outputs wired directly into my M Audio. My M Audio is a Fast Track Ultra 8R, and this device is really for interfacing with the PC. Now, this would stand alone as its own recording device. I could basically not have the bottom strip here, but the reason I opted to go this way is for a little bit more money. I got 8 jacks that are on the front of the unit that I can plug into, so when I set this box up someplace to record, I have pretty easy access to all the knobs and everything that I want to control my gain staging and also anything I want to plug into it. So for me, it just made more sense to spend that extra money as opposed to screwing around with the back end of the thing, plugging stuff in. Everybody has their own preferences. Now, on this M Audio Fast Track Ultra 8R, you can see I have everything pretty much turned down because I don't even use the sound volumes from here. I'm just basically feeding audio into that to go to the computer, and then the outputs of those are going to this device up top, which is a PowerPlay Pro 8 by Behringer, and this is really just an 8-channel headphone distribution amp. Now, the cool thing about mixing the Fast Track Ultra 8R and the PowerPlay Pro 8 is that the outputs of the Fast Track Ultra 8R can be grouped into banks of 2 for custom mixes. So, for example, if I want to put drums and bass together on a set of outputs, and they can have their own, their own mix without hearing as much guitar or vocal or whatever, I can bank them up like that. If I'm recording a full band, same thing with guitars. I can put rhythm and leads together. We have a violin player. I can isolate the violin under her own channel because she really needs to hear what she's playing, since the violin is primarily a, an ear-based instrument. It's no frets, so you have to hear what you're playing, so it's in tune. Really gives me a lot of versatility with having that type of subgrouping to pass on to the headphone distribution amp. So that pretty much wraps up the piece on my portable rig. Now, what I used to use with this is the Fast Track Ultra 8R has an output for a USB cable on it. That USB cable was plugged into a laptop, which basically just sat up on top of this thing. And I had my Sonar software loaded onto that laptop, so I was able to capture MIDI events and audio events onto my laptop, bring them back to my home studio, and work with that. Since the time that I purchased most of this stuff, we've evolved onto an actual recording studio in that area, and I now just use this to capture ideas to pass on to the rest of the group in preparation of going to the studio. The next piece in the gear assembly here is my old Tascam FW1082. I don't know if you can see that okay. And basically, this is a combination device. It's a digital audio workstation control interface. And on the back of this, if I were to turn it around, you'd actually see input jacks for microphones and guitar cables and things like that. But I don't use it that way anymore because I'm now using Pro Tools, and Pro Tools requires, the version that I have anyway, requires that you have M-Audio hardware. So the Fast Track Ultra 8R now serves the purpose of having the M-Audio hardware. So what I use the 1082 for is just a surface controller. And I may eventually get rid of this and buy the DigiDesign. They make their own version that has the inputs and outputs. So for desktop recording environment, that might be the way I go. That way I can basically box this up and stick it out there for when I go and do live recording. But this basically gives me motorized faders. I can do my control and automation of Pro Tools from within that environment. And it's pretty handy. Basically, I think it sets up under HUI emulation mode. Which is a whole other topic. It's very quick to set up though. If you go to Pro Tools, I don't know if you can see this on the screen or not, probably not. So I'll just tell you here, if you go to Pro Tools Setup and go down to Peripherals, MIDI controllers, you can pick type HUI. This is a very crappy video. I'm using my phone. And then you'll see 1082 control in there and say send to. Both of these are going to be the FW1082 control. And to get there, if you have a 1082, on the board, there's a little thing here that says Control Panel. And if you hit Control Panel, this basically would pop up. Normally it pops up a little control panel here. And on here, the control panel, you can go through and pick HUI emulation mode from the drop-down. I don't know if you can see that or not. I left the clock source to the internal and 44.1 kilohertz, and these are all default settings. But if you set it up that way, then when you go into your Pro Tools for MIDI controllers, you can have your HUI in there. And basically what I can do now is I can go over here and move a fader on my device, and it'll move it on the software there. So as I move this fader, you'll see that fader move in the software. And conversely, if I go over and I use my mouse to move this fader here, you'll also see over here that fader's moving. Because it's sending the control signal back and forth. So it's just basically recycling this piece of equipment for another purpose. Very beneficial, in my opinion, to have a control surface when you're working with any type of audio stuff on a computer. Especially if you're used to, like I was, working with faders and knobs and stuff like that on the old analog gear. So then in here, of course, I'm using Pro Tools M-Powered. This is version 8, and this is running on a Vista 64 machine with 6 gigabytes of RAM and 4 processors. Very stable environment, and been pretty easy to make the conversion from Sonar 64 over to the Pro Tools M-Powered. There's of course some things I miss from Sonar, but you know, one of the big things is the 64-bit digital nonlinear editing capabilities, and I think that the mixdowns sound pretty good, but I think it's just a matter of me learning how to use Pro Tools a little bit better. So that's where I'm at, and I just wanted to kind of share with everybody this. I don't know, this is kind of silly. I'll show you this anyway. This actually is pretty handy in the studio, but really it's my Z board, and I use this Z board for playing Ultima, or not Ultima. I use the Z board for playing Dungeons and Dragons online. But since these buttons are kind of remapped for playing video games, they actually work out pretty well to remap them for shortcuts and keys and stuff. Kind of like having a little special board, but well, it's exactly like having a little special board. How silly. Alright, well, thanks for watching, and have fun.